Hey guys, next up another build video / guide, and today we're playing Path of Exile 2. I know many of you are used to my Souls-like content on this channel, but I cannot lie, I've been playing this game so much, I'm fully addicted, as it's been the, even though it's only in early access, the best action RPG I've ever played. Anyways, Path of Exile is notorious for having a super in-depth and fairly complex passive skill tree, and being the theorycraft addict that I am, I wanted to try my hand at winging it and just kind of coming up with my own build without following any guides or anything like that, so this is what I came up with, the Flame Tank. So initially I knew I wanted to play a tankier character because in every action RPG I've ever played, if you focus purely on damage, you are super susceptible to being one-shot, and one-shots happen all the time in these games, especially in the end game. So knowing this, I was thinking I wanted to be fairly tanky, and that lended pretty well to the warrior, although with how energy shield works, I think other classes are actually probably more survivable. But that aside, as I was leveling up, I got the feeling that, hey, damage really isn't an issue right now, it's mostly survivability, and the story is the same in the end game. It feels fairly easy to stack damage, but you gotta make your character tanky as well. So that said, the focus of this build was tankiness and survivability, while also having some decent damage and screen clearing ability, but most of all I just want to be able to survive like in big crowds. And then dealing with these crowds of enemies initially came from priming some of them for a heavy stun and then hitting a bunch of them with Boneshatter. However, as I was experimenting, Magma Barrier and Armour Explosion was a really potent combo that I was not expecting to work as well as it did. Frankly, I think Magma Barrier might be a little underrated, but we'll get more into that later. Real quick, I'm not going to claim that this is the speediest or most optimal way for a warrior to speed through endgame maps, but as I've been clearing tier 16s pretty regularly and pretty quickly, and after grabbing my 5th and 6th ascendancy points with relative ease, there's definitely a lot of potential in this combo. And we're renouncing Giant's Blood here, most impressively. No two-handers, I know, right? We're sticking with good old one-handed maces. All right, let's take a look at how this build works. So Wraith's Shield or Active Block is here for obvious reasons. I mean, we're using a shield, and I know a lot of warrior builds like to utilize the passive block while whipping around a two-hander in the other hand, but this build makes a lot of use of the active block, and that's unsurprisingly due to Magma Barrier. You know, I guess it makes sense to just talk about Magma Barrier here, so we're just going to scroll down and do it. Yeah, so basically Magma Barrier infuses your shield when you active block for a very short window, and I mean this duration can be increased with Gem Cutter's Prisms, but if you time your active blocks to when an enemy is about to strike you, you will spray magma in like a frontal cone-esque AoE that does honestly super strong damage for what it is, and the speed that you can whip it out at. You also get an endurance charge each time you pull this off successfully, and so it's not hard to maintain the base maximum of 3 endurance charges, so that's really nice, but the synergy with Armour Explosion as a support gem here is a little crazy. I'm not exactly sure of the scaling here, but it does a ton of damage, even while using the Sphalan Unique Shield, which is, you know, it has a great lucky block effect, but it has very low armor, meaning that its actual scaling with Magma Barrier is actually quite terrible. Yet Magma Barrier and Armour Explosion with that shield is my main way to clear maps. It does so much. And as far as the other support gems, we have Overpower here, just 50% more stun buildup. This already has some decent stun buildup, but with this slotted, as you are blowing things up with Magma Barrier and Armour Explosion, usually that's enough to wipe groups, but sometimes you'll be priming things for stuns, and it's good to get a Boneshatter in there to help kind of mop up any stronger enemies. Pretty useful here, I think. I would keep this here if you run this build. Then we have Magnified Effect, obviously 40% bigger AoE in the frontal cone that Magma Spray hits for is really useful. It makes the Armour Explosion spread even further too, so I would definitely keep this here as well. And then Fiery Death, which I think supports the crowd clearing ability of this ability. It's really good. It kind of gives you that finishing blow thing kind of going on with the Overpower as well. It is really, really strong. It takes a little while for the corpses to ignite, so that's the one downside. So you might just end up spamming Magma Barrier and you see corpses priming for their explosion, but you usually wipe the group before then. But there are moments where you're in a longer extended fight and these explosions will help like significantly. They'll either finish off some stragglers, wipe out enemies outright, or they will prime things for stuns. This thing actually has a pretty good stun buildup, this Fiery Death support gem. So these are what the gems are right now, and I think I'm going to keep them like that for a bit. Though at some point I did have Rage slotted in here. It's on Mace Strike right now, but Rage was also decent here because you can just build up Rage while blocking each time. You're blocking all the time, so you build up Rage really quickly. I could see you maybe swapping out something for Rage, maybe Overpower if you don't care so much about priming for stuns and things like that. So that's another consideration. I think this skill is super underrated, to be honest. It does a bunch of fire damage thanks to this particular build, and on top of that, some pretty impressive stun buildup. And again, I would not be surprised if somebody leaned into the damage of Magma Barrier even more than this build does, because I'm using the Sphalan, which has pretty low armor and does not boost the damage of Magma Barrier that much. It's honestly a lot, and if you pull off a successful Magma Barrier block, you can instantly start another one. There's seemingly no cooldown as long as you successfully chain together blocks. A cooldown is initiated, though, as soon as you miss one. Obviously, you have to pay closer attention to the attack animations of mobs and bosses, and be aware of what attacks can't be blocked, etc. But overall, if there's one thing you take away from this video, is to try Magma Barrier, especially if you're a tank build. Alright, moving on. Boneshatter is pretty straightforward. You've probably used it a ton while leveling, but when you see the primed for stun symbol floating above a mob's head, that's your signal to go ahead and smack them with this. On this build, you want to make sure you Infernal Cry first, usually before you start active blocking from Magma Barrier, I would think, just for some extra AoE clear, but Infernal Cry will also empower your Boneshatter so that you'll have another heavy-hitting, semi-AoE ability to kind of finish off whatever's left, usually. Alright, so support gems for Boneshatter. We have Impact Shockwave. This fits in naturally here because Boneshatter is meant to heavy stun enemies if they're primed for stun. So this aftershock will occur when you heavy stun an enemy, and this kind of gives Boneshatter a little bit of AoE clearing potential. So this is why this is here. Really useful to mop up those stragglers that survive your like Magma Barrier Armour Explosion spam. Then we have Elemental Focus. This is just a straight damage boost while taking away its ability to inflict Ignite. Ignite is a fairly big deal in this build, but not for this ability. Once again, we're just finishing things off. We just want to kill whatever's left, so that's why this is here. Similar story with Exploit Weakness. We get a pretty good damage boost from broken armor, but when we're finishing things off, we don't need their armor to be broken anymore, so I'd rather have this hit harder while consuming the broken armor debuff. So that's why this is here. And then Execute, similar story. I mean, we just want to hit harder on things that are on low life. I think it's 35% or less, so this is here for just another straight damage boost. Boneshatter is meant to be a finisher, and it's a really strong finisher in this build, so yeah, those are why those are there. And real quick, we'll just go over Mace Strike. I mean, this isn't our main damage dealer, but it does deal significant damage and has some decent utility with the way I have it slotted right now. So, as we said before, I have Rage slotted here just to build up our Rage when I'm hitting things with this. It's usually against rares and bosses when I decide to get a few swings in, and you can build up some Rage, and we have support gems and other abilities that consume Rage to boost our damage. So that's why this is here. You could put this on Magma Barrier, again, as I said earlier, because you'll have tons of Rage if you're going through a map. I would keep this slotted here against like a boss or something, because you're not going to be spamming Magma Barrier as much against them. So this stays here for now for me, but you could definitely throw it in Magma Barrier, and you'll just see you get Rage like so quickly and going through a map. But then after that, we have Culling Strike. I think the health thresholds for the enemies are 30% for normal, 20% for magic, and 5% for rare and unique. So basically, if those enemy types, if their health is at that percent or below, you will just outright kill them with this with a swing. So that's kind of why this is here. Kind of boosts its damage in a way, gives it a little finishing off utility. So I like it there. Then we have Immolate. I'm not interested in igniting things with Mace Strike, although I am interested in igniting things with our heaviest hitting abilities like Perfect Strike and Hammer of the Gods. So that's why Immolate is here. It boosts its damage by 30%. You get 30% more fire damage per swing, but you can't ignite. Totally fine trade-off on Mace Strike. And then we have Ruthless, which makes every 5th swing cause 500% more stun buildup. Again, kind of useful against bosses mostly is why that's here. But you might be able to slot this something else in here, but this is just how Mace Strike has been serving me so far. Just decent utility, decent stun buildup. Not bad DPS when things are ignited as well, but yeah, that's just Mace Strike in a nutshell. And next up we have Infernal Cry. This is a strong screen clearing support ability for us warriors, now bolstered up by our fire damage with this build. You basically shout, debuff as many enemies as you can, and try to hit them with like an empowered Boneshatter, or just blow them all up with Armour Explosions. The resulting explosion damage isn't quite as high as Magma Barrier or Boneshatter or Armour Explosion for that matter, but it's still a pretty significant assist in clearing out some of those big groups of enemies. Sometimes you're left with some stragglers, as I've mentioned, but again, not too hard to finish them off usually. Now, just to clarify as well, you can use this shout to empower more than just your next attack based on how many endurance charges this can consume when you cast it. And as we said earlier with Magma Barrier, we'll have 3 endurance charges pretty much every fight, so it's perfect for dealing big damage to things across like a few big hits, like a Perfect Strike, Hammer of the Gods, and a Boneshatter. Alright, real quick, let's go over to support gems. So we have Raging Cry, which will give you 4 rage per 5 power of the counted enemies in range. I think bosses and uniques count for 20 power, so you're always getting 16 rage when you debuff them with this, which is really good. I mean, we're using support gems that consume rage to boost damage, so that's why this is here. Then we have Premeditation. This just kind of boosts the skills that you use after this that are empowered by this by 15%. You just do more damage with whatever your Boneshatter, your Perfect Strike, your Hammer of the Gods, whatever you empower with this is just going to hit a little bit harder. That's why this is here. here. Then we have Enraged Warcry, which is actually a rage consumer alongside this rage generator. It's interesting, but this will consume 10 rage if possible to once again do something similar to the previous support gem, just boost the damage of your empowered abilities that you use after this shout by a whopping 30%. Really strong, definitely recommend keeping this here. And then there's Expanse. This gives it 50% more area effect, debuff way more enemies, 6 seconds to cooldown, which is actually not too bad. It feels a little rough, perhaps, but if you don't have like the right gems to lower the cooldown or increase your cooldown rate, but it hasn't been feeling too bad to me. I've been using it. I never feel like I have to wait for it, essentially, even with this cooldown added on. So that's why this is here. Feels manageable, the plus 6 seconds. So yeah, that's the support gems for this. All right, we already went over Boneshatter and Magma Barrier, so let's just go over Molten Blast. It's here because it does fire damage, essentially, and in a pinch, it can turn you into a ranged caster if you don't want to get close to whatever it is that you're hitting. I usually use this just to keep pressure up on bosses and keep, the stun built up from degrading. But with some quality upgrades, this will actually inflict fire exposure, so that could change the way I approach some fights a bit. But for now, this is mostly just a ranged option for times when you don't want to get close to a big bad, or to kill annoying mobs that just like to run away from you. All right, support gems for this. Acceleration has a pretty slow projectile speed. I just decided to throw this on here to speed it up a bit. Controlled Destruction. This does 30% more damage with hits and ailments, which is really strong. I wish I could put this somewhere else, but it is a spell-specific gem, so you can't really put this in any attack spells. Maybe there's a place for it in Magma Barrier. I could see that being really good if you want to boost the damage, but right now I needed the extra area of effect, so I could see some potential to switch some out here. This is a pretty whopping gem for elemental attacks, but anyways, it stays here for now. And Long Shot, this is more damage at longer range, so that's this is the only projectile ability we're using, really, so that's why this is here. All right, so next up we have Leaf Slam, and I really like this for the mobility, obviously, just being able to hop across chasms or up cliffs, and it can save you a lot of time since we're definitely a slower class. However, I found that the Holy Descent support gem was actually a pretty big game changer. I'll just mouse over it real quick for this tanky build, because I often just found myself hopping into a group of archers and casters since they're stationary and won't follow you, and just with a group that I've been kiting around, I'll just Infernal Cry, Magma Barrier spam combo, or maybe throw a Boneshatter in there just to wipe out a group. And the Consecrated Ground effect actually would feel really effective. It heals you for 5% of your health every 5% of your health every second for 4 seconds. So that's 20% of your health returned in a relatively short amount of time. So that really felt good. It felt like a really safe cushion for you to just like jump into a group. Not too big because obviously you get blown up, but if you jump into a group, you'll just have this healing that you can rely on a little bit before you start spamming block or setting up a little bit of a combo. So that's why the support gem is here, and that's why Leap Slam is really helpful. And let's see, we also have Fist of War. We don't have a lot of slam abilities here. I mean, we do have Hammer of the Gods down below, but this stays here for now because there are a bunch of other support gems that were more important for Hammer of the Gods. So this is just here for now. If I get that 5th slot on Hammer of the Gods, I might move it down there. But for now, Fist of War stays with this. Just deals a little extra damage. 20% every 6 seconds. It's fine. And then the Aftershock, this is also another consideration for Hammer of the Gods, but 25% chance to basically do double damage, essentially, right? I think Aftershock just does another round of damage of whatever it is on a slam ability. So this stays here for now, again, because we have some more important gems in Hammer of the Gods. That's what Leap Slam looks like for now. Really useful ability. I really like it. Can't recommend it enough. It's really good to escape crowds, too. So if you're in a really, oh shit situation, you can use this to just get out, jump over mobs. So yeah, I really like it. All right, next up we have Perfect Strike, which is a heavy hitter, and honestly might be my favorite ability in the game. I highly recommend getting the timing down with this one based on whatever your swing speed is, because it hits like a truck, and it has a 100% chance to ignite if you perfectly time it. And the timing isn't too hard to get down with practice, and you can block while you're channeling, so there's some slight synergy there with this build. It also has 20% increased magnitude of ignite when it's upgraded with Gem Crutter's Prisms, which is decent. Definitely does something, but again, as a few of you know, magnitude of ignite isn't the most efficient thing to try and scale. We'll get into that later. Regardless, with this build, we're going to be leaning into ignite damage a bit. So this ability is definitely one of the more important ones in this arsenal. And yeah, for the support gems, we have Fire Penetration, pretty straightforward. We want to penetrate fire resistance when you use this ability. Window of Opportunity, this is interesting. It decreases the window in which you can perfectly time this with. You have to hold down a button, whatever you keybind this to. You hold it down, you have to let go at the right time, and that would be considered a perfect timed swing with this. So you shorten that window of perfect timing. It's a little harder to hit, but then you deal 50% more damage if you are able to pull off the perfect timing. And again, Honestly, I don't think it's that hard. If you're not good with timing, maybe it could be, especially in like hectic situations, but this I think is just a free 50% damage boost. If you're able to practice and get that timing down, definitely obvious. This is just like an obvious support gem to be, slotted in here. Martial tempo I think is also necessary. I wish I could just slot in another damage ability or damage support gem, but it is a little slow, and this makes it feel manageable. I mean, you can see here, like that feels decent. That speed feels decent to me. If you don't have it there, it's a little slow in fights. So I do recommend keeping martial tempo here. It's a good gem. I think it's necessary, honestly, especially if you're going to use it in maps. You do want to use it sometimes to wipe out some elites in case Hammer of the Gods misses or something like that, or if it's on cooldown. You need this to just be able to feel a little safer. You don't want to sit there channeling for too long. That's why this is here. And I mean, after that we have Rage Forge. As we've been talking about, this will consume 10 rage, deal 35% more damage. Very straightforward. We have all that rage build up on the other abilities. So this is here, free 35% more damage if you have rage. Pretty good. All right, and Hammer of the Gods is here. I'm sure a lot of you have been using this ability already, but it's basically a big AoE and single target nuke on a long cooldown. Well, we really want this one to ignite though, because ignite damage is based off of the initial hit, and this being our heaviest hitting ability, it makes sense to make it ignite. And I'm talking about ignition. I don't know why I'm phrasing it that way. So ignition makes it ignite. It's a 100% chance to ignite. We want this to ignite because the ignite damage is actually significant. It might actually do more than the initial hit. So average damage per use, like 100k, which is all right. And then, where is Ignite? Oh, here it is. Yeah, 30 to 50,000 per second for 5.4 seconds. Yeah, that's pretty good. That's a lot more than the initial hit, right? So that's why we want the Ignite to be here. We want the Ignite support gem to be here. So it ignites, because the Ignite damage is actually doing more than the initial hit right now. So very strong to have this Ignite, and we have just, different ways to boost its damage. We have Concentrated Effect. Take away some area of effect from this ability, which kind of feels rough at first, but 40% more damage is just so huge. And it's not hard to kind of make up for that area of effect. If your aim is good and you know to like stay near where it's going to hit, you usually hit your targets. We also have some AoE boosting passives on the skill tree, so the AoE feels not that terrible. You do miss it a bit if you're used to the big wide AoE that is its default, but I felt like this was useful and totally worth it. 40% more damage is huge, so that's why this is here. And then we have Fire Infusion, just extra fire damage. More than other support gems. This seemed to just boost the damage up with this ability by more than other things I tried slotting it in. So that's why this is here. It's just extra fire damage. Why not? And then we have Primal Armament. This is also a really significant damage boost. 25% more weapon elemental damage. Just trying to boost this damage up as high as possible for those huge ignites and those huge initial hits. Pretty strong ability, really strong ability actually. There are builds that make this hit even harder, but this one makes it hit pretty hard. The ignite damage is kind of what makes this so strong in this build. You'll see that you'll just melt bosses with this thing if it hits the way it's supposed to. If you have all your debuffs up at first, you have your break armor and the boss is ignited. You want those two debuffs up, and then this thing hits like a truck. Really strong. Like typically I will wait till a boss has fully broken armor and is ignited before I use this, or just break their armor, queue this up, and as it's falling you can perfect strike, since it has a 100% chance to ignite, and then it's usually timed in a way where it all just happens at once and you just deal a ton of damage at once. Really satisfying when you pull it off. All right, and then we have Shield Charge here. I think is a super useful mobility option and stun buildup option, as well as damage, honestly, after the buff. I find myself using this most in the middle of a big fight rather than using it as an initiator in a big crowd. For instance, if I see like a group of casters that I need to get to quickly as I'm fighting a bunch of mobs, it really helps in that situation because you can block projectiles as you're charging at them, and then when you hit them, you usually wipe out whatever your target is, or you heavy stun them. Really strong ability. I honestly can't recommend this one enough. However, as I said earlier, I think Leap is a better initiator since you can jump over targets and you will jump to where you actually put your cursor. You don't have to worry about running into things along the way, which this thing will. If there is a target in the way of where you're trying to charge to, the charge will end on that target that's in between you and your destination, your intended destination. But still, I don't knock it at all. It's a very strong ability. It actually deals significant damage after the buff, again, based on your shield's armor, so it has some decent scaling, has huge stun buildup, and an extra mobility option is always good on this particular class. And real quick, support gems for shield charge, we have Ingenuity, which increases your cooldown recovery rate by 30%. Be able to use this a little more often. I could see maybe an argument for putting this in with Hammer of the Gods so you can use this more often, but for me, I just wanted to boost the damage up of Hammer of the Gods as much as possible for the biggest ignites possible, so that's why Ingenuity is here. Momentum, which will increase your damage by 40% after you move at least 2 meters, so you'll see an animation, there's like a green flash when the momentum kicks in, but basically if you're hitting things towards the end of the shield charge, you're going to get that 40% damage boost every time. I think this is super useful skill gem for this ability. And then we have Close Combat. Your collision is always going to be hitting things that are point blank, so this is just a free 25% more damage on this ability. It's honestly hitting pretty hard, so like don't knock it. It's a hard hitting ability, especially if you can get that like distance in for the momentum. And then we have an empty slot right now. I just haven't decided what to put in here, so yeah, that'll come with time. All right, last but definitely not least, we have Time of Need. I think you all know why this is here. Very straightforward survivability tool. That periodic healing and debuff removal feels really good. I just found this to be more useful than other auras. I mean, I was running Overwhelming Presence for a little bit for the extra stun buildup and ailment threshold, so that's potentially another option, though I would avoid Herald of Ash currently, at least. I mean, I was initially running that because I thought the theme of this build, it would fit really well, but it's honestly a trap. Like, I don't think it's bugged, but the current scaling value of the overkill damage on that aura is just really bad, like really bad. It barely does anything at the moment, so I would avoid using that at all costs. It's a trap. Anybody suggesting you use that, I don't really think has crunched the numbers or is looking very closely at what that thing does, so don't use Herald of Ash. I wish it was better, but right now the scaling is terrible. Avoid it. I definitely would use Time of Need in the other auras, if anything. So, real quick support gem. So we have Fast Forward. So this makes the healing and debuff removal occur much more often. You can see it's been happening this whole time as I've been recording. Really, really useful support gem for this ability. I would not put this anywhere else. Then we have Herbalism. This is very straightforward. 30% more recovery from life flasks is pretty huge. Lifesaver in a lot of situations. So this is here. And then we have Cannibalism. Also really, really strong ability, 4% of life recovered on kill while supported skill is active. So as you're spamming block and you're taking damage, you'll see your health just jump back up just every time you get a big like Armour Explosion chain off. It's really strong. I love this ability, or love this support gem. Definitely have it here or on just whatever aura you're using. You should have Cannibalism attached to it. So really good support gem. All right, and with that said, let's take a look at the passive tree. So currently I'm level 89, and you can see the route that I took here kind of tries to have a good mix of fire damage and ignite nodes, as well as some pretty big AoE nodes, before ultimately nabbing Avatar Fire and converting all of our damage that we deal into fire damage. This is my way of significantly increasing our damage while maintaining a mostly tank-focused build, since we can now bypass armor values with our elemental damage, and we have Ignite, a potent damage over time ailment at our disposal. And I know there's some weird kind of inefficiency running Armour Break when we're already bypassing armor with fire damage, but obviously at this point you know that we're in it for the Armour Explosion support gem, and honestly some pretty strong damage nodes. I mean, if you look real quick, like down here, you get 60%, 20%, and another 20% for 5 passive points down here. 100% more damage for on fully broken armor in 5 points. It's pretty strong. Real quick, before I get into it, let's go over the Ascendancy nodes real quick. So we have this bottom chain here to Turtle Charm. And if you don't know how Turtle Charm works, I mean, you lose 35% block chance, which feels rough, but you can now block damage from all hits while your shield is not raised. So your passive block, which normally blocks like strike attacks and projectile attacks, I believe, it can now block AoE attacks, which is massive. That's like some of the most dangerous stuff in the game is an AoE, and you can now passively block it with this. So this will save your life just so often. Really strong ability. Really like this, and when I wanted to be a tank, I knew I wanted this ability right off the get-go as soon as I learned how it worked. So this is really strong. This is why this is here. And before that, we have Renly's Training, which gives you 40% base chance to block from your equipped shield instead of the shield's value. I think you could correct me on this in the comments, but essentially this means that you will have 40% chance block on your shield no matter what. You don't want a shield that rolls block chance to itself because it doesn't matter. If your shield block chance is like 26%, it's automatically 40 with this ability. I'm pretty sure that's how that works. Please correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure that is the case. And then we have Anvil's Weight, which breaks armor equal to 10% of the hit damage dealt. I mean, obviously it's pretty important to make sure that our armor explosions go off in one magma barrier block. But you know, I know it seems kind of weird again since we're dealing fire damage, but I kind of like it thematically. It's like you're melting, you know, your target's armor or something. But for me, I currently need this just so that the armor explosions go off a little faster, and that we more consistently get our 100% damage boost from those passive nodes we talked about earlier. So that's why this is here. Again, I was actually using Jade Heritage for a bit, which I could see being really strong here. I mean, once I get my last 2 ascendancy points, I'll probably get this again. I found it kind of useful to just cast like Hammer of the Gods or something and just encase yourself in Jade and just let the hammer drop on you while things are trying to kill you, you know? It's a little risky though because Jade Heritage does not stop damage over time effects, so that's the one thing that's a little dicey with it, but I do see some use there, and I will probably get this with my last 2 points whenever I get around to unlocking those. So that's what the Ascendancy looks like right now. All right, so other notables I think are worth going over. I mean, we have Defender's Resolve down here, and I think it's totally necessary because we active block a lot, and you will build up stagger quickly sometimes. So you want to be able to get rid of it as quickly as possible. And when your shield isn't raised, this will dump out the stagger 50% faster. I think this is completely necessary, which is why I built this string down to here. Then we have Burning Strikes over here. This is just, you know, significant boost of fire damage. And the node up here, Burn Away, is just so. This whole gathering of nodes is actually really strong. You got fire damage here, fire piercing or penetrating fire resistance, more fire damage, and Burn Away, just a little bit of everything that you want with this build. So really good bunch of nodes up here. And I also grabbed Reverberating Impact down here, just a little more AoE and a little more armor break for attacks. I felt like it was pretty useful for 2 points, you know, and this just helps so many of our abilities that are AoE, you know, Magma Barrier, Boneshatter, Hammer of the Gods, and Perfect Strike, actually, which is an AoE skill. I don't know how many of you knew that, but it's considered an AoE skill. So any AoE or AoE damage boosting nodes will apply to that. And then moving down here, we got these one-handed damage nodes and Reaving, which I really like. This gives us swing speed and 15 to dexterity, which I really like for hitting our dexterity quota for our support gems that we're using. And there's a chest piece that requires a hefty bit of dexterity, and I'll go over that in a bit. But this is really good for the swing speed because we have these nodes down here, which slows down our swing speed. But this essentially cancels it out. I think it's 8% here, and between these nodes, it's 8%. Let me see, 1, 1, 1. 5, yeah, so you don't lose swing speed if you take this node and these 4. And I do suggest these 4 because these 3 just boost your ignite damage by such a large margin. It's totally worth it. And yes, I've gone Resolute Technique just because I really do not want my attacks to miss, especially my Bone Shatters, with this version of the build at least. And I'm not really concerned about critical strikes, so I may revise that in the future or try a different version of this build, but yeah, since I'm not worried about critical strikes, that's why Resolute Technique is taken here. And you can see we have the Aftershock AoE increase. This is mostly for the Boneshatter, obviously, but you know, this is a good combination of AoE and AoE attack damage is really good. I like these nodes, and that's why we obviously go up here and take a bunch of these. It's more of the same story here. Really strong nodes for area damage and AoE, range of your AoE. Then we have Avatar of Fire down here, obviously, with this really strong fire nodes here. The magnitude of Ignite, maybe I could see an argument for putting these 2 points elsewhere, but they're here for now because they're making a significant difference currently with my Hammer of the Gods Ignite, so that's why these are here. I want to keep them, but I can see you putting them elsewhere. I think that Towering Shield is actually really important here because we're active blocking all the time, and this gives you 25% increased chance to block if you've active blocked recently. So this buff will pretty much be up all the time in any fight, so I really think this is a good one. And then up here we take Blood Magic, obviously, because we're warriors and we have health to spare. Seriously, Renounce Mana, because it's just a bit insane how much of these abilities cost in the late game as a warrior, so I would highly recommend using health instead. Elemental Resists here, Maximum Lightning Resist here, and we got some strong fire damage nodes here. I mean, I think you pretty much get the gist of the build at this point, though I think I may try a variation of this build where I delve really far into the like sorcerer portion of this tree, because there are some really good fire nodes. I mean, right here has some good fire damage boost in AoE, and up here is obviously the goal. This is probably like the best fire damage like gathering of nodes in the whole tree. So there is a way to do it, I think. I have to theory craft a little more, but I think I'm going to be curious to try that out next, because I do think I'm staying a little bit too much in the warrior zone here. So I think keep an eye out for another variation of this build where I boost the damage a little bit more by jumping up into the sorcerer section of the passive skill tree. But yeah, this is the build for now. If you guys want a link to this build or something, please let me know in the comments. I'll quickly whip one up and just throw in the details of this video. But this is what I've been running for endgame maps. I'm sure it's going to, undergo some tweaks, maybe again to go into that sorcerer part of the tree for some extra damage as I fight some of the harder bosses in this game. But I've been really enjoying this this flame tank build so far. Hey, I'm in the middle now. I just want to go over my gear real quick. So the gear is currently looking decent-ish, although there's still definitely some room for optimization. And yeah, I know a lot of you are currently looking at my Svalin and Warrior Invictus, these two uniques, but I just want to say right now, these are absolutely not necessary to the build. I was just lucky I was able to afford them recently, so I reworked my build to accommodate them a bit. I still think my old chest piece and shield are laying around here somewhere, actually. Let me see. Yeah, so this shield and this chest piece were the two that I was using before, and this build was just as effective. Well, I don't know about just as effective, but still super strong with these two. So again, you don't need these two uniques to run the build. This is just my current setup. But yeah, the reason I got the Svalin is for block chance. I just want to be able to block often without having to invest so much into block chance. With its lucky block ability, it basically means your blocks roll twice. So if you're hit with an attack and you fail to block it, you will roll again for a chance to block it based on your block chance. So that's why I really like this. So it let me, basically block often with a lower block chance. I didn't have to invest as many passive skill points into block using this shield. To be honest though, again, I think you'd probably be better off with like a well-rolled rare shield with a bunch of armor and life and whatever else you need, because while Magma Barrier does decent damage with this setup, it scales with the armor of the shield, and Svalin has pretty low armor. My old one had 600 plus, so I mean, Magma Barrier is not hitting as hard as it could, and I'm not really sure what Armour Explosion's damage is based off of, but I mean, hey, if it's working this well with the Svalin, with its low armor, imagine some cracked out high armor shield instead, right? Warrior Invictus is basically giving me a huge chunk of health with the way that it is rolled and socketed right now. Though my health is still only around 3k, which is decent, but it's really not anything that's special, to be honest. Like if I prioritize more max health rolls and found more ways to get strength in my build. Also, maybe if I went Titan, this number, my health would be a lot higher. But it's still helping me survive and be tanky, so it's kind of worth it in my opinion. But I mean, other than that, it's business as usual. I'll just mouse over each item real quick, just trying to hit whatever elemental resists I can. Got a little extra spirit, and I think I rolled, what was it? Intelligence on one of my items here. I think it was on my ring. Yeah, intelligence for the Warrior Invictus. I needed that extra intelligence boost to be able to wear it, since it needs, as you can see, 51 strength, 51 dex, 51 int. But other than that, it's a similar story. Just getting elemental resist where I can, strength, health. Any maximum mana rolls are kind of useless since I'm not using mana. Again, there's room for optimization here, but this has been what has been working for me. However, I'll talk about the weapon separately because it's important that it rolls elemental damage as high as possible, melee skills as high as possible, and flat fire damage is an okay bonus, but really a big physical damage roll is just as important, if not more. I mean, I know you lose 25% with the conversion after Avatar of Fire, but it's still, those kind of rolls are the things that you're looking for in a weapon. Now, obviously, it's important to socket it here with soul cores of Sitaqualatl. That's what I'm going to say, Sitaqualatl. And that's 30% increased elemental damage per soul core that you slot. And obviously I corrupted this mace, so I'm able to slot 2. That's 60% more elemental damage with attacks. So really, really huge fire damage boost with these soul cores. But yeah, the rest of the gear is just socketed with soul cores of Jaquani, just trying to boost up my health as much as possible. And yeah, that's currently what my gear is looking like. You can see my stats here on the left too. Decent-ish chance to block. Armor is kind of whatever. It's a little bit on the lower side, honestly. Resists are looking okay. Could use a little bit more max resists on some of them, but it's tanky enough for now. Again, it's not super optimized at the moment, but it's been serving me really well. So overall, that's what I've been running with some honestly great success in these later tier maps. I'm sure I'll have to tweak things as I come up on bigger challenges like pinnacle bosses and such, but right now, I mean, this is what's been working for me really well. I might try like a second, a dual wield setup too for the Hammer of the Gods, once I find a good enough mace to have that second weapon set up. But for now, I mean, this is what's been working. Anyways, I hope you enjoyed the video. If there's anything that you take away from it, is to please try Magma Barrier. I cannot believe how much of a meme that ability seems versus how useful it actually is. But yeah, that's gonna be it for this one, guys. Till next time.